Hey everybody, Coach Patrick here from Endurance Nation. Welcome to our Run Durability webinar. This webinar is part of our educational outreach and content series where we're trying to share the lessons we've learned inside the team. A huge part of how we operate, and you'll see just simply by what I'm going to do today, is sharing information, sharing experiences, hopefully helping people have to avoid recreating the wheel and et cetera. As we are less gurus inside the team as we are guinea pigs, educators, leaders. I do more to lead than I do to sort of chastise or motivate you. Endurance Station is a very unique space, and this webinar manifests that. So today we've got a bunch that we're going to talk about. Before I dive in, some administrative things for you. This is roughly going to be about 40 minutes of talking, and then I've got 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. It will be recorded, so you'll get that at the end of the webinar, so you don't have to worry about that. And you'll also get a copy of the slides in addition to the actual screencast, so you'll be all set. Those of you not on the team, I'll also be sending out an opportunity for you to create a free trial to the team, so please definitely stay tuned to your inboxes for that as well. The way that I handle questions, I ask you to put them in the webinar chat box there on the side of your screen. You can type them in, and then I'll come back and answer them all at the end. So please know, if you ask me a question at minute 7, like, wait, go back, say that again, I'm not going to see that until the end. But I will stick around and I will answer those questions. And so even if you can't, they'll be in the recording and you'll get them there. But if you can't stick around, you'll get the live answers as well. So you can do that. All right. So with that said, run durability, right? Using run durability to build a breakthrough triathlon season. The reason why I'm doing this webinar and the reason why we have a change in focus towards more run durability work inside the team is that we began piloting run durability as a separate plan for our more advanced athletes back in 2014, 2015. And we gave this plan to athletes as an opportunity for them, having proven their experience in training and ability to race and put together a good race plan. We gave them this plan as an opportunity to show they can continue to build their run across a year. Took out a lot of the intensity because they've been doing it for years. And let's see what happens, right? It's something that I've done before, but let's see what happens. And we were definitely blown away by the results that people had over time. They were healthier, they were faster, even though they weren't doing more speed work, and their race performances improved significantly. And we'll get into each of those aspects here in today's webinar. But for us inside Endurance Nation, run durability has become one of our cornerstones for the 2016 season and ostensibly beyond as well. So I have a couple of key points here that I want to hit with you today. And hopefully I'll be able to communicate all of them and give you a sense of not only where we're coming from, but the why, and then help you do a better sense of making sure that you're doing the right work this winter leading into next season. Okay. Before I dive in quickly, some background here on Endurance Nation. I started by Coach Rich, my business partner, Rich Strauss, on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. In 2007, we are an online community of self-coached endurance athletes. And what that means is that we are all peers. When I race, I share my data. When you race, you share your data. When someone else comes to learn about that race, they can see all of our data. And together, we are cumulatively smarter and better than anyone else could ever be on our own. All of our training plans and resources are targeting the age group triathlete. So, stay-at-home mother of 4, got that, super crazy busy professional who works 60 hours a week, got that crazy professional who was also a mom, got that all the way up to folks in their 60s and beyond who are retired, still very, very active, have high performance related goals. The net is, no matter who you are, where you're at, we've got plans that fit your schedule and will allow you to achieve your goals in the manner with which fits your life, which is our most important part. There's a lot of places out there where they give you plans where you have to make crazy sacrifices in your world, and that's not how we operate inside Endurance Nation. I tell people when I call them on their welcome call to join the team, I say, look, I work for you. If you tell me you can't swim on this day, or you can't bike on that day, or you need to do this on that day, it's my job to figure it out, not yours. And that's how we work together. Okay. We are also the creators of the 4 keys of race execution, the only race execution specific guidance out there in the triathlon space, as well as the first time finish guarantee. Anyone who signs up, we make sure you finish that first half or full distance race. And if you don't, we pay for your next one. The net being, we have great plans, we have incredible race execution resources, we've got a community to keep you motivated, and we guarantee you finish by backing that up with our checkbook. You're not going to find anything else like that inside the triathlon space. There's a whole lot more, but that's the net of it, so you know, okay? All the things that separate us, I think really it comes down to the knowledge. If you're doing Wisconsin for the first time or Racine for the first time or Vineman, they just fired up an Ironman on the Vineman course for 2016. You probably know nothing about that race, even though you're signed up. We've got that information. We've got that experience here inside the house, not only from the general racing and pacing execution related items, but also race specific race reports. You can talk to people who've done those races. You can learn from them. That element of the team is unsurpassed. It's one of the reasons why we are second time, soon to be third time Division One Ironman Tri-Club Global World Champions, because we have a team that is not only active on the race scene, but also very competitive by virtue of what we do. So certainly worth checking us out, not just for stuff like this, but just, in general, want to be better. So who am I? Coach Patrick, when I'm not racing and wearing ridiculously large hats on my head. I started coaching back in 2004. I started racing in 2001, did Eagleman that year, and then Florida. Got into coaching full-time by 2004, which means since 2004, this has been my full-time job. It's coaching triathletes. So just like you are a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a nurse, whatever your profession may be, I do that for triathlon coaching. So just like I would come to you for accounting advice or legal advice or facts on my car or how to take care of my body, you two come to me to talk about triathlon, and my job is to get you square. So the resume 22, I believe, I can't remember. Ironman finishes, 927 personal best. Just raced Hawaii for the 7th time. Performed. I think I've won every possible 1 through 5 place in my age group across the years. I think I'm missing one of them. I'm not sure which one it is, but I won my age group in Texas of 2012. I am your East Coast coach, the running coach inside Endurance Nation. Former Peace Corps, spent my time in Central Asia and Uzbekistan, and then headed over to Azerbaijan and did international development for another year, the International Rescue Committee, before I came back to grad school, and got derailed by not only the beautiful woman you see next to me here, but also the sport of triathlon. Kind of never looked back. So live in Rhode Island now, and this is what I do: travel to races, travel to camps, coach athletes on the phone all day, getting people set, and doing things like this, preparing this run durability information for you. So let's step back for a second as we talk about this run durability issue. And the reason why we brought up run durability for this webinar as a topic for the world, not just for Endurance Nation, but for the world, is to really communicate that that race day as a coach is really not a ton of fun when it gets to the run, because you see people all around you. I'm standing out there. I was just at Ironman Florida, standing at the entrance to the park, and I am just seeing people fall apart. People are just miserable, suffering. It was definitely hot on the run in Florida this year after a brutal swim and normal bike. It was very hot on the run. People are suffering and they're fading. And I'm reminded once again, in this case, from a race context, of not only how hard our sport is, but how hard it is to be successful at our sport. And when it comes to running, there's just no hiding from the fact that if you're not ready to run well on race day, whether that's from a pacing perspective, a nutrition perspective, or a fitness perspective, which is what we're primarily concerned with today, then your race times will suffer dramatically. You can have a great swim and a good bike, and if you go from a 10-minute mile run, which you were hoping to hold, and you get that through halfway, and you go to an 18-mile run for the back 13, you've added, whatever that is, 104, 1 hour and 44 minutes to your overall race time by virtue of the second half of that marathon. And so our job as coaches is to help eliminate that experience and improve your ability to race. Okay. And I think a lot of it comes down to the mindset of triathletes. They really kind of bring out this concept that, they wear triathlon on their sleeve. They love exercising. They're all about it. You've got stickers on your car. You're wearing, crazy shoes to work. You're eating gluten-free now. Any chance you have to wear a visor, even at like a work function, you would wear a visor. whatever that may be, triathlon permeates your life. But in reality, triathlon is a very, 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 very small part of everything that you do. And it's important when we think about improving the run and working on the run. I want you to step back and just think about it from a systems-wide perspective. You look at that pie chart on your screen, and you see that training, this is what training 12 hours a week, which is pretty comparable for either half or full distance athletes, except for perhaps some of the bigger weeks. It's a ridiculously small part of that 168 hours you have in a week. Doing this chart also reminded me that most people sleep more than they actually work if you're working typically a 40-hour work week. But I'm assuming most of us end up not having the purple life pie as big as it is, because work tends to creep down into that space as well, and we start to suffer. But the point being, we're dealing with a very, very small part of your life. And when we think about training, and within that small part of your life, we're trying to think about running. Okay. Add to the complication of crazy lifestyle, add to that complication that people love to go crazy with the gear, and aero bars here or aero helmet there, swim pants, lava pants, swim goggles, and those things are what they are. But you start messing around with your feet, you start messing around with your footwear, and some pretty crazy things can happen to people. And in general, very few of us are biomechanically sound enough to just go out and pound out the miles, much less do so in minimalist footwear or attire. Okay, and I think that a lot of people put themselves in danger generally by going to super lightweight shoes without transitioning correctly, without making sure they actually do have dorsiflexion in their ankles, or making sure that they can handle that work, or making sure they make that transition gradually, or with the help of a physical therapist or some other professional. They generally just say, hey, look, everyone that I know as a triathlete seems to wear these crazy shoes, so I'm going to put these crazy shoes on and I'm going to be great. And if I could, collectively, if I could have that, that 6 or 8 weeks that you lose back, because you can't run because you got to deal with these foot-related issues or lower extremity-related issues, your year would be significantly different. Okay, and so there's a combination of training being a small part of your life, locked in your office, locked in a seated position, not very active the majority of your day, but extremely active when you're outside of the office or outside of the home. That duality is very tough to manage. On top of that, add crazy equipment trends, etc. Things are definitely starting to get stacked against you. So before we dive into more specifics, I want you to step back and think about what run durability means for you, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Some of you have training related durability issues, okay? And I put you in this category if you are constantly having issues, plantar fasciitis, calf strains, Achilles tightness, upper hamstring related issues, perhaps just IT band issues, things that consistently every year you can get up to 25 miles of running, and then boom, you got to back it off for a couple of weeks, and then hopefully you're like, okay, well, I'll take it easy, but then I'll build it up again for my race, and then boom, you're like, okay, well, I don't need to run the last 4 or 5 weeks to my race, I'll be fine, and then you kind of gut it out on race day. So there's a portion of athletes within our population who spend the majority of their season just sort of bouncing around between running injuries. Okay, so take a look at that. Are you that person? If you are, what is the longest sort of uninterrupted block of training you've had? It's important to ask that. I get a lot of people coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to break a 4-hour marathon in an Ironman." Well, let me tell you, if you can't run more than 8 weeks without having some kind of a setback, that's going to be really, really hard for you to do overall. So stepping back and finding data and information about yourself is a great way to begin to move forward in improving your run fitness and overall race day performance. Okay. From the racing perspective, I want you to know, hey, what does your run look like on race day? Like, is it strong? Does it fade? Do you blow up? Do you pop? How does that run compare to your training runs? When people say a half or an Ironman is really just a long training day, they're not really joking. There's the length of the event, anything over 5 hours, really takes out the opportunity for you to perform at levels that are higher than what you've consistently done in training. In fact, many people underperform relative to what they've done in training. So case in point, elite swimmers, they may, swim 100 in, 56 seconds, right? I'm making that up. That probably is not even elite at all. Sorry. All the swimmers are laughing at me now. They swim 156 seconds, but at nationals, they hope to break that by 4 seconds, right? For us, you may ride 112 miles at home in 6 hours, and you are just hoping that you come anywhere close to 6 hours on race day. Like, we're hoping that you get somewhere near that number. I'm not looking for you to go 5:15 and shave your legs and all of a sudden drop tons of time. I don't want race day to be any different than your training, just by virtue of how long our events are. Okay, so take a look and figure out what category do you fall in terms of the run durability issues. Some of you fall into both. Many of you will fall into the training side. Some of you will fall into it from the race side. But whatever it is, there's value on both sides of this equation for dealing um, with the run durability equation. So just to show what we're looking for from a race perspective, here is a file that shows what's the sort of classic fade of an Ironman run. Okay, and so I'm not even really looking at the pace, so you can see the pace generally slows down. What I'm looking at here is the heart rate. Okay, so we have too high of a heart rate choice, whether pace, heat, who knows what, through about mile 6 before things start to fade down. They kind of settle in to a different heart rate zip code, if you will, here from say mile 9.5 through mile 13, right? But even that is now no longer possible because of what they did earlier, and that drops down again until they hit about mile 16, where things really hit rock bottom. They really suffer. There's a couple walk breaks in here, significant. They're trying to recover. They kind of get their mojo back a little bit at about mile 20. They kind of hustle it out, but they still got to take the breaks. They still got to back off. And then finally, in the last 2 miles, the finish line is close enough. You can hear Mike Riley or someone announcing, and you can kind of pull it out. Now, this is a classic fade file. I did not pull up the, oh my God, I just imploded at mile 6 and walked, because you don't need to see that file. You can guess what that is. I did not pull up the race day was great till mile 12, and then I just kind of did this walk, run thing for the last 14 miles, because you kind of also have a sense of what that looks like. But I consider this to be a fade run. Okay, let's contrast that with a more solid run file. In full disclosure, this is my 2000. It was this year, I think, 2015 Ironman Texas file. So it's a flat course, so I do have that going in my side from a heart rate perspective. Coming out of transition, you can see that I pick up a steady heart rate that I try and hold as long as I can. Right about here, right, mile 9 through mile 12, it starts to build up, and I pay a price for this. Even small heart rate cost, I have to bring it back down again and kind of consolidate. And I lose focus here. Not so pleased about that. But I am able to kind of pick it up and then be strong over the last 4 miles through the end. Okay. And so what we're looking for in race day is I expect to see your pace drop over time. That's just a function of how the race works. But those early miles, if you do it right, are generally faster because your heart rate's lower coming up out of transition. And you're running at a heart rate that you can sustain all day, a heart rate that you can maintain across the entire run segment of your race. And that's something that you've proven in training, but you not only have the fitness to do it, but you have the experience running at the pace. You know what you need to do nutritionally. Your body, quite frankly, is used to being in that space. And what we find with a lot of age group triathletes is that they're never in the space that they are going to be doing their race at for very long. And when they get into that space on race day, they're not really sure if that's where they're supposed to be. They're not sure how that feels. They don't know how to handle it. And they end up making poor decisions within that space as well. Okay, so very important you can see that. So our goal here is to synchronize the training pace and effort on the run for the half and full distance triathlons with that racing pace and effort. Okay, and it's much, if I could change fonts, I'd make the effort much bigger than the pace, because I'm more concerned about effort as it ties into race day than I am particularly about pace overall. But there has to be some kind of overlap and synchronicity here for you to identify with the value of the work that you're doing now in terms of what it means for the rest of your year. And I say that because I get plenty of emails from people who say, I should be running, a 3:30 Ironman marathon, but I'm running 4-hour marathons, and I don't understand what's happening. I want to run faster. I run faster in training, but it's not I'm not able to do it on race day. Well, being able to run that pace on race day is a function of not only the conditions and how you handle them, also obviously how you pace the bike and how smart you are there. But ultimately, it comes down to familiarity of that pace. And a lot of people will pick pick paces in training that they believe they can do on race day, even though they can't. So, if you let's say, we'll tell people inside NeuroStation, hey, the first 6 miles, I want you to give me 30 seconds per mile. So if you were hoping to run 9:30s, I want you to run 10s. And so people on race week are generally like, oh, okay, I'll give you 10s. But if you and I are sitting down now in November and I say, I want you to do the majority of your run training at 10-minute miles, you're going to laugh at me. Like, I could run 8s. Why would I run 10s? But if race day comes and you're praying to whatever triathlon God you believe in that you could run a 10, there's really not a lot of value in you spending the majority of your runs at 8-minute pace now, because it has zero relationship to what you're actually going to be doing on race day. I don't want to talk to you about 8s until you can show me 9s on race day. You show me 9s and we'll talk about 8s. But don't talk about 8s and throw all these 8s at me now when on race day you can barely get to a 10, right? And so having that perspective, being able to go back and look objectively at your data and understand where you fit is super important, okay? All right. Time to define some run durability. And just for reference point, I'm not talking about my daughter's feet on the other side. I'm talking about my feet. This is before Ironman Tremblant 2014. Got to represent the night before race day. You got to put on all the Endurance Nation tattoos, of course. Critical part of the racing kit here. I think when a lot of people think about run durability, they think about lean legs and lots of veins and all this stuff. And in many cases, that's really what it is. Stuff that's borne out over years of consistent running. And in the interest of full disclosure, I played soccer all my life until I got to college, and then in college I rode for Boston University, head of the Charles, all that good stuff. And then I got into running after college as best I could before I got into triathlon. So for better or for worse, I've been running for the majority of my life in some way, shape, or form. Although I will have to say that I certainly didn't have these legs through much of my youth. I definitely was on the bigger side, and what you see is the result of tons and tons of work, which really lines up with run durability, because run durability is not something that you just go out and make this year. You can't just say, dear Santa Claus, give me run durability for Christmas. This is awesome. I have it. Just like these new Aero bars and just like this new, Bluetooth connected trainer. Now I'm going to be awesome next season. Like, that couldn't be further from the truth. Run durability by definition is a long-term undertaking. Okay. It's an extension of taking your run focus outside of just a race preparation 12-week period, saying, hey, how am I going to improve this across my entire year? How am I going to do that in a way that connects not only with my race day, but keeps me focused on my goal? And when I look at this definition slide, the most important part of it is frequency and consistency. Okay. Triathletes, especially age group triathletes, are constantly having their training interrupted. They are they get sick, they have travel, they have injuries or setbacks or something else that comes up, and the net is instead of having 10 weeks or 12 weeks or 16 weeks of consistent running, they have 4 weeks with a stop, and then 6 weeks with a stop, and then an injury, and then slowly build back for 2 or 3 weeks before they get into it. And all of a sudden, that 16-week period, instead of having 16 weeks of running in it, really only has about 10 weeks of running. And it's a lot of it is overlapping running, because it's going back and restarting and rebuilding again, etc. And the net is you're not really moving the needle on your run fitness across the year because of these changes and setbacks you have in your year. So how do we avoid those setbacks? First and foremost, proper pace selection is critical. Okay, this chart here, I'll let you take a look at this chart for a second. This chart here is our training zones inside Endurance Nation. So you got heart rate on the left, you've got power for the bike, second column, third column is the perceived exertion, and then the fourth column, the red one here, is you have it, is the run. We have 5 training zones inside Endurance Nation that we focus on. And what we've added for the run durability focus is what we call total run pace, TRP, which is essentially the midpoint of zone 1 and zone 2. So we use the Jack Daniels running methodology program, where we have the very easy running, followed by progressively harder levels of running. So in the case of the athlete here, let's say, my long run might be 8:45s, but my marathon pace will be 7:30s. So there's a big gap between zone 1 and zone 2. And part of that is just um, how the Jack Daniels running system is predisposed to not having you run too hard unless you are specifically running hard. Otherwise, you're just running easily. So the pace that we're talking about is the pace in between these two, the midpoint. So if your zone 1 pace is 10 minutes per mile and your zone 2 pace is 8:40s, then your TRP pace, that middle point there, is 9:20s for you. Okay, and so go back. You can either go, if you're on the team, you've got your calculator, you can go look at it. If you're not on the team, you can go and look at any Jack Daniels website. Usually has a calculator, or I believe attackpoint.org or .com has a website as well with a calculator on it, and just drop in, pick a race time or a test time from the run, drop it in, see the numbers, and then see where you fit. Where does your run performance lie? Are you at running close to long run pace, which is kind of a target for the Ironman pacing? Are you close to the marathon pace here, which is closer to the target for half pacing? But regardless, what we're looking for is that run space in the middle. This is a pace that you should be able to run at consistently day in, day out, no issues. It's very close to your normal gait. One of the biggest friction points we have with zone 1 running is that people just don't know how to run any easier than what's listed there. Okay, so having a good pace determined there is super important. Okay, so most triathletes work backwards from their race. They say, I want to run, a 3:45 Ironman run, for example. So I know that's 8:30s, but I am going to walk every mile. So back out 27 seconds for those 8:30s. Now I'm at 8:03s. So I got to run 8:03s, but it's going to be hot. So I'm going to train at 7:46s. Before you know it, who knows how fast you're running. That's not how I want you to think about it. I want you to go back and take a look at your run performance, whether you think it's a good run performance or not in terms of consistency across the day. See how that pace matches with your total run pace. Is it truly that midpoint of zone 1, zone 2? If it's not, if you're not in that zip code, which the majority of people are not, then you definitely need run durability and you're definitely missing out. Okay? So what does a sample run durability workout look like? Very simple. You get your warm up anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. The older I get, the more warming up I need. Just feel it better. So plan accordingly and get yourself warmed up. I think a lot of people tend to either head out and just kind of hammer away at that main set or not. But for me, I think the warm up is still critical. And again, if we step back and say, hey, we want you to be healthy across your entire year, then I definitely want to warm up. I don't want you just to jump out of the office and start sprinting. Okay, your main set's got that steady time at that total run pace or effort in this case, that midpoint, whether it's heart rate or pace, it's right there. And then you've got a cool down, jogging, walking, whatever it is. Okay, so it's a very simple, straightforward set. So this is a pace that again you can do all day. And so from an effort perspective, it's rarely going to put you in a place where you're like, oh man, after that run, I need a massive break. It's not like a threshold run or a hill run where you're really set back. In many cases, this is just real steady, solid run. Okay, you can always adapt this workout. You can add in strides. You can change the terrain of the run to make it more challenging. As you get more consistent with your running over time, you can even build the effort over that last mile. I'm a huge fan, just in general, of kind of finishing my runs a little strong at the end, just to get in that mindset of, hey, I finished strong. I enjoy building my effort. I find that just kind of, for me personally, mentally sets myself up well for the rest of not only my runs, but also for race day as well. So what does it look like when you do a run durability workout? If you can ignore the fact that my Garmin 920 is a massive elevation issue, hey, 10,500 feet is actually pretty good for my Garmin these days. Normally I'm much closer to Everest levels. You can see how this run plays out. Okay, so I start out running, etc. kind of ease into my run. The pace kind of builds over the first half mile, and I ostensibly kind of sort of settle in here. And then in the back half of my run, the elevation does drop in this particular run. I pick up my pace, and I kind of come through and finish strong. Okay, so what you'll see is that my heart rate basic is kind of building all day, except for my pit stop, and then I head back in again. And what we're looking for here is a pace that sits in that zone. So in my case, from a heart rate perspective, this is a little high. I'd like to see it closer to 142-ish, but the run pacing is right on for the effort. So I'm pretty close to my zones, but this is what I want to see. I'm not asking you to put yourself in a box. I'm not saying your heart rate can't go up. I'm not saying you have to put a cap on your heart rate. For example, if it's 142, I'm not saying you can't go above 142. As long as that average heart rate for that run is pretty close to the target number you want, it's okay to have some variability within the context of that run. I want you to still enjoy running. I'm not going to put you in a locked box. But I do want you to understand that there's a need to kind of build your effort across that run to start off smart and be good. And what you'll see over time is that these runs will evolve. And in this case, this is a snapshot I took from early November, just about 3.5 weeks ago. This same run now, I'm running closer to 7-minute pace. My heart rate is lower. And so just over time, as I get back into running, so re-entry time after the time off, end of the year, get back into running. Early runs, my heart rate's higher for the effort for the pace that I see out there. There needs to be some reconciliation. And as I am consistent with my training, continue to get rest, take care of myself, etc., I see the heart rate start to drop, and the paces also start to improve a little bit as well. So over time, as the run durability work takes effect, you see how that plays out. Okay. Thinking about the run, I also want you to keep in mind what it means across a year. And I threw this chart in here from Training Peaks because I want you to understand the value of run durability across a year. So this is all of 2015 in terms of runs, and these is weekly run mileage as shown on a chart. Okay. And I kind of break it down a little bit for you. But what I want you to see here is that, people have a tendency to remember both personally and also in others, like the best efforts. So it's easy for me to talk about myself as a 40 miles a week kind of guy. But when I come back here and look at these numbers, I only cracked 40 miles in a week a couple times. In fact, maybe call it 8 weeks total across the entire year, I broke 40 miles. Whereas, if you'd asked me on paper, I probably would have told you it was 20 weeks, but I didn't. Not at all. In fact, my average run distance for this whole year was 28.4 miles per week. And that got me, a 9:29 performance at Texas. And then 10:02 in Hawaii on a pretty hot day for a great race. So it's not like you have to be putting in tons and tons of miles on the run. What's more important, and what I want you to see from this chart, is the body of running, right, across the entire year. So there's definitely some rest periods. Like I think this was school vacation week. This was the week after an Ironman. Same with this week after an Ironman. But you can see the general steady build or steady work, then a build up to a taper and a race, steady work, then a build up to a taper and a race, and so on, and then now getting back into it. So I think it's important for you to not only know what your average run data is, so you can kind of benchmark yourself against that, but also to have a better sense of how your year plays out. And if you've got bigger chunks or gaps in here, then you're really going to be setting yourself up for some challenges. All right. So part 3, what does it mean to structure run durability across your season? If you've got the run durability concept and you're like, yes, I'm a person who needs it from a training perspective, or I need it from a racing perspective, or perhaps both, then what does it mean to build that across a year? Well, here is a chart from last season's presentation on how we break out a year inside Endurance Nation. Okay, so I'm gonna let you digest this chart. What you can see moving left to right in the different colored columns. Okay, you can see that we have yikes, come back. You can see that we have put in here the preseason, which is sort of that general rebuilding, getting back up to speed. We've got the out season, which is where we do most of our hard work. We have a focus block. Exiting the out season, we have a focus block where we dial in a specific discipline. It could be swim, could be bike, could be run, depending where you're at. Then we recover from that period, and then we head into your season. And depending on how close or far your race is, we've got different levels of work that we're putting into your race preparation period of your year. Now, the run durability stuff, and in general, what we're talking about, falls into these 2 early sections of your year. So we don't have a race on the calendar. We don't have demands for volume per se. but we're looking to improve. And the big change for us has been right here in the out season, which is to say we used to talk all the time about fast before far, building fast then far. Experience has now taught us that that works absolutely 110% on the bike for sure, but on the run, not so much. I would rather have 3 to 4 months of really good running, building you up to some solid run fitness, and then use this focus block to put some run speed on the solid legs and sustainable run fitness that you have before we head into the rest of this year. Contrast that with past years where we would have you hit the effort level and the intensity fairly soon out of the gate in the out season. You're going to see a big change, especially those of you who've been on an older out season plan before joining us this season for 2016 or beyond. Okay, so I got to figure out how to turn off all my notifications showing up on my dashboard. I apologize for that. So as we think about what we're going to be doing in the course of your year, the run durability element starts here, but it's really kind of carry you through the rest of your season. And we're going to focus on it here in the wintertime because we don't have the targets of races. We don't have a demand to do swim, bike, and run at high levels. We have a lot more flexibility. Plus, for most of us, the weather just stinks. Like it's just really, really bad, and it's just not great. It's not great to be trying to push your bodies by going too hard, trying to basically dial in what you're going to be doing out in season with what you're doing early in the year. And you can do that from a run durability perspective by being consistent, by being focused on a pace that's going to carry you through the rest of your year. But previously, we had to do a lot of sort of higher intensity work that wasn't necessarily related and didn't necessarily translate well to the rest of your year. So we're trying to change that for sure heading forward. So what would that look like from Inside Endurance Nation's perspective? And so what we're looking for, we have some goals for you. And I set these goals apart because I wanted you to think about running frequency first before you thought about any type of distance. And so the first and foremost thing I want you to think about is a frequency goal. So I'm expecting from a beginner perspective, I'm expecting you probably start at 4 runs a week. We can hopefully eventually build it up to say 6 runs. Intermediate folks, you got 5 to 7. Advanced folks, 6 to 8. So the net is when you're thinking about run durability work, it's lots of little runs. So I think I'm running 6 days a week right now. And this past week, one of my days was a double day. So I had 7 runs this past week. This week, I'm going to be moving it up. I think I can't stay at 7 runs this week, but I'm going to add a little distance to them so I continue to push the number forward on the volume side. And so the net is I want you to think about that frequency element of it first. Find out where you're at, see what you've done the last 6 weeks, and then we're going to gradually build yourself up. Okay. Inside Endurance Nation, we've also added some targets for the out season. So for beginner folks, we want you eventually to build up to 26 to 30 miles a week. Many of you right now, those of you who started with us in the November out season, many of you are in kind of 24 miles a week range. For the intermediate folks, I'm going to build you up 20 to 32 miles, and the advanced folks, you're 30 to 35 miles a week. The goal basically is when we have you exit the out season and you're entering your year, for example, in these more advanced athletes, you could be averaging 35 miles a week, which if we go back to the previous stuff, you'll see that I only averaged 28.4 miles. And so when you think about it, for someone like me to put myself at 35 miles a week on average now, this early in the year, that's a significant leap over what I've done in the past. And again, I want to hammer home the need for you to relate the work we're discussing here, and you think about run durability, to what you've done in the past. If you've typically averaged 20 miles a week across a year, I don't want you to go out and try and hit 35 miles a week. More is not better in a situation where you're going to basically undermine the effect of the run durability program by overloading yourself with your training. Okay. So by target races, here's another slide for you to look at in terms of what I'm hoping you'll get to. These are not secrets. These are not keys. They do not guarantee awesome race performance, but overall, they do have there is a synchronicity between these distances, and more elite levels of performance. Of course, some of you have injuries or considerations where you can't do that much mileage. And obviously, as a coach, I would work with you in the forums and we manage that out. But in general, these are some targets you should be thinking of. So, in the half distance, if you're exiting the out season at 28 miles a week, you're pretty close to what you'd want to be doing for the rest of your year. You're already in a pretty good place. And the value here is that you'll be able to add as you start adding more bike volume, and adding the swimming in, you're adding that volume and that swim on top of this run foundation that you already have in place. And you get to carry that run through another 12 weeks or 20 weeks, depending on how the duration of your race preparation plan. And that's just double the time, right? You just get double as much time at that consistent running. And ultimately, when you think about building a year, that's what really makes a difference, okay? So where is the speed? Like, where does the speed come? So I wanted to work through this and show you again from my charts perspective, you get a sense for where the speed happened in my year. So you can see where I built for Texas, taper race, where I built for Hawaii, a little bit of a bigger build, try to do more volume in this push, taper, and then race. What you see before each of those periods is a 6-week block where I did more consistent training. And this training was generally closer to 30 miles, although in the case of between Texas and Kona, I was pretty darn exhausted. And so I really took a lot of downtime and didn't do a ton of training. It's more, just running, 18, 15 miles a week, et cetera, except for 2 bigger weeks. But what I was doing basically was saying, hey, when my volume is low on the run, I can do more intensity on the run. The lower volume on the run gives me the bandwidth to handle a higher training stress. But as the run volume goes up to match the demands of what I have for myself on race day, then the effort level has to go down and the speed essentially goes away. I go from hoping to hit threshold numbers to, hey, how close can I stay to that target run pace for my race, and how much time can I spend there to be more prepared, nutritionally, mentally, physically, physiologically, for a good race day. So there's still opportunities for speed, but they fall into different segments of your year, and they generally run outside the realm of the race preparation phase that you have. Okay, so super important for you to think about. All right, so part 4, moving along here, trying to make up some time for you guys. Sorry, run durability in your training plan. All right, again, I want you to step back and just remember how much running has taken up in terms of your year. And so here is a chart from my Training Peaks account that shows what I did across the season. So just under a third of my training was the run. The rest was swim and other, and then tons and tons of bike. And at the end of the day, you're a triathlete. When people come to me and say, I need to be better at running, I ask them about their bike, because you're a triathlete. And when you run on race day, it follows after a massive bike. That bike performance and that bike fitness really dictates what you're going to be able to do on the run. And so at the end of the day, a lot of it comes from the bike and improving the bike. So I want you to just remember, when we talk about making changes, we're really only talking about this one part of your overall system, okay? So within that context, what does a basic week look like for run durability? So here's a sample running week from the out season that we do now in the wintertime. And you'll see that we basically have 3 break runs, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Then we have a medium long run on Wednesday and a medium long run on Sunday. And then we have an optional run on Friday. And so, beginner athletes will do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Intermediate athletes will do the same, perhaps a bit more on Saturday. And advanced athletes will add in this optional run on Friday. That allows each group to achieve the frequency and distance that they require to continue moving the needle on their fitness. But more importantly, you can see how we balance out target runs or key runs, which in this case would be Wednesday and Sunday, with more frequent runs on the shorter scale, which are these brick runs, and then optional runs as well. Okay, so you can kind of see how the run week plays out from an out season perspective. Now we head out of the out season, and many of us will be heading into a run focused period of time. In this case, quality runs are now on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So we go from 2 quality runs to 3 quality runs. And the nature of these quality runs changes. All of a sudden, we're spending time at Tuesday at run threshold pace, and on Thursday at that VO2 pace, the zone 5, quite high effort level pace. And commensurately, we're still maintaining some form of a long run on the Sunday that allows us to build up that speed, but not sacrifice what we've already built up on the endurance side. So a bit of a change here in the run focus to get more quality running into your program, still keep the frequency up. Okay. Then we move into race prep. From a race prep perspective, things are definitely different, right? The big bikes are Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday inside the team. And so that means we've got a quality run on Tuesday before you dive into the week, your long run on Thursday. Everything else is a brick run or optional across your day. The only difference is the Sunday, where we recommend athletes who run slower than 12 minutes per mile in their training for their long runs, that they reduce the bike duration on that Sunday workout from 3 hours down to say 2 or 1.5, and they fill that time gap, the time that they've saved, with another medium long run to get the numbers up. Because for fitter and faster athletes with a higher VDOT, the Jack Daniels VDOT, you might across your week you might be able to run 40 miles, say on 5 days of running, but that athlete who's running 12 minute per mile, they're only in the 30-31 range, so they're not getting that run volume in. And I don't want to extend that long run and really kind of hammer on them too much. I'd rather separate that long run out into another session, put it on the back half of a bike, get much better about the pacing side of things, develop that mental toughness. When I get off the bike, I go for a run, kind of dial that stuff in. So that's what that looks like. And again, I want to reiterate, when you think about running across a year, you can see the different types of work. There's the Ironman week, which has a lot of running and some significant long runs. Contrast that with these faster speed weeks, where you've got lower level of volume, but much higher intensity overall. And when you dive into that chart, you'd see that, like, while the numbers are down, the intensity factor for these runs is definitely some of the highest of the year, because I'm doing some significantly faster running during these periods. Okay, so part 5, last part of the day here before I get into FAQs and then the questions from you guys. This is a shot of me taking off for my 40 miles on my 40th birthday. Got my friends and my family starting with me here, having some fun. Nothing like fun in spandex in the winter. So how do you essentially build a habit that you can sustain? Run durability is it's not sexy. It's just something you do every day, but you do it every day, and it becomes more of who you are. The cost of doing those runs, etc., they're not hard anymore, because it's just what you do. You put your shoes on and you run. It's rainy, you run. It's snowing, you run. It's hot, you run. It's cold, you run. You're busy, you run. You're tired, you run. You just put on those shoes and you run. And because it's run durability pace, I'm not asking you to go out and run your best 5K. I'm not asking you to go out and run zone 4. I'm not asking you to go out and run on a hill in the ice. If it's snowy, you can still run steady. If it's cold, you can put on more clothes and run steady. If it's hot, you just run steady. Running steady just adds up over time, So think of it like, the U.S. Post Office, right? It's done. Rain, sleet, snow, whatever. Your junk mail is going to get to your door. All right. So some tracking, I think, is super important. Online training logs, got a bunch on the sidebar now. So many devices and everything, they all just connect automatically. For me, when I get back and turn off my Garmin at the door, and when I get into my house, it automatically syncs with my phone. Everything pushes up. I can all of a sudden see my progress across a week and the number of runs that I'm doing and how that matches to what I want to do for my own goal setting. That's huge. And that makes life a lot easier, and also keeps me honest. As a coach, there's a huge disconnect between what you say you're going to do as an athlete and then what you actually do. The gap between those two, your ability to be as realistic as possible, there's definitely a correlation between the faster athletes and the ones who are more honest with not only me, but themselves about their training. The folks who are like, oh yeah, I think I've done like an 11:15 at Lake Placid, and then you go back and find out it was actually like a 13:15. Like, that person is just not in touch with who they are as an athlete. And just like if you think that you're running 40 miles a week, but you go back and look at the data, it's 28, you're not in touch with something there. You're missing something. And your race performance is definitely not going to map with the work that you've done. You got, a surprise coming in July when you do Lake Placid. Let's change that. Let's dive into those numbers, right? And more importantly, I hat tip to Tom Spinner, keep me focused on my Hokas and changing up my run shoes. Keep that equipment fresh, especially if you're doing more running. Those run miles will add up. We want to keep that going, okay? Streaking, no, it's not what you think it is, and no, I'm not going to put a picture on this page at all of that kind of stuff. Sorry, don't want any of that associated with the Endurance Nation brand, but truly, frequency is the key. I'd rather have 7 runs than 4 runs. I'd rather have 2-a-day runs of 1.5 miles each than longer runs. I just want more frequent running, more times running a week, more times starting runs when your better runs are, when you're more mindful, than just runs where you kind of zone out after 15 minutes, right? I'd like you to set targets for runs versus distance per run. So 7 runs versus 26 miles. I'd rather you focus on the process goals, not the outcome goals. Okay. And ultimately, give yourself a target. Set a stretch a week that you're going to reach towards. Give yourself a goal. So in my case, right now, I'm building to hopefully hit a 60-mile run week. The last week of December, that Christmas to New Year's. God only knows what the weather is going to look like, but I'm going to do everything I can fitness-wise to get myself up to that. So I've given myself a target, something to be motivated for, and something that's going to keep me going now early in the year. You want to have fun. There's lots of different ways to do it, from running with groups and running with clubs to exploring new areas. This is super easy. I do this all the time. Head over to Strava, see what segments are in your area, go out and run those segments, connect your route to those segments. You can do the same with Map My Run, Garmin Connect. There's plenty of ways to see where other people in your neighborhood are running. Go out there and do it. It's not that you're trying to win the segment. It's just like, hey, I didn't know you could run over there. People run over there. Let me go check it out. So have fun. Don't run your normal routes. Don't lock yourself in a box trying to hit the same paces. Just go out there and have fun. Okay. All right. Before I dive into your questions, and please put them in there, I'm coming over to them in a second. Here are some frequently asked questions that I get about the Run Durability Program. So, how can you even tell that it's working? Well, on one level, it's the charts and the darts, right? I can tell that last year, I averaged 28 miles per week, and this year I'm averaging 32. I'm doing better than last week. So in some cases, it's more about the process than the outcomes. I already know it's working because I'm doing more, right? So I'm good from that perspective. But more importantly, over time, you'll see that, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that heart rate start to drop as you become more efficient running. You'll also start to see that pace for that same sort of perceived effort drop as well. And so you'll know the Run Durability Program is working when going out for a run mentally is nothing. It's just what you do, going out for 5 miles. But more importantly, you're starting to see some of those paces come around. When you get back and sync things up or take a look at the watch, you're actually kind of surprised that you ran 7:05s instead of 7:15s, because it sure as heck felt the same, and there was no real difference. In fact, it was even windier than today. So for one, I look at that. Okay. You also know if you get more and more comfortable at that effort as compared to what you've seen on race day. So, if you look at your race day file and you say, oh, my average heart rate on race day was, 140, and you're trying to do 140 paces now in your training, and it's, either you're doing your 140 heart rate, and your pace is, crazy slow. That'll change over time as the pace starts to come down. You get familiar with that heart rate zone. But also the bandwidth or the ability to run at that heart rate grows as well. So you get used to spending time at that 140 heart rate. You get familiar with what that heart rate is. You can kind of lock it in, but you also are able to build some depth at that speed, much closer to what you do on race day, and it's better than what you would see on race day, right? Another question I just got emailed in yesterday. How do you reduce that sort of flat feeling? Because the mileage starts to go up and your frequency increases, people start to feel kind of flat. Well, in many ways, run durability is a blunt instrument. So I don't expect you to feel light and springy when you've only had 8 hours between runs. That's not necessarily the case. I would say that in my case, I take my Sundays off from running. I come back on Mondays. Mondays, my run feels awesome. Even Tuesday, they feel great because my legs are still fresh. I don't have a lot of fatigue in them. So as long as you're still having, spring in your step when you're supposed to after some rest days, etc., then you should be good. If despite rest, no matter what you have, you're still feeling that fatigue, and we know that your nutrition is good and you're getting good sleep, then it may be time for you to kind of change with that mileage. Maybe drop that mileage down. I'll take, let's say you built yourself up to 32 miles in a week and you just feel awful and you're not enjoying it, etc. Dial it back for a week. Take it down to 20 or take it down to 16. Cut it in half. Go crazy. Try and keep the same number of runs. Just instead of doing 5 miles, you're doing 2 miles, and just really drop it down. Get the frequency in, but keep it super super short, and then build it back up again the next week. It could just be your system kind of needs a little bit of a reset, but more often than not, I find that it's a bigger issue. Food. Overall rest, etc. As mileage and volume go up, so too does that run then begin to creep into other areas of your life where there may be some friction. Okay. So you also get questions about is the pace the same? Is the pace the same all year long? Do you still do the same pace? If I do this, am I doing the same pace in November that I'm doing in August before Tremblant? What does it mean? Well, the answer is no. Like as I mentioned earlier and showed you that run file, I don't want you to lock yourself in, for example, at 140 and you can't go over and you can't go below, and that's a failure. As you'll see from my run, I started off lower and I finished higher. My average heart rate was pretty close to where I wanted it to be. It was a little high. That's okay. So you can have some variety and different effort level in your run pace as long as that average sits where we want it to be. Now, as you get closer to your race day, we're going to have you try and run more closely to that run target because I want you to get very familiar with fueling and pacing and demands on your body at that effort level. So in many ways, I become a little more focused on exactness in terms of pace and heart rate. And usually that dovetails well with what most people are experiencing because quite frankly, when the volume goes up, they're pretty darn tired and they're not really interested in overachieving. Overachieving, with 6 weeks to go to race day is just showing up and doing the workout because it's just so much at that point in time. So the paces do change a little bit, but more than that, our focus changes on what we want you to do. So there's much more race specific running in that last period, and we'll include some different variety of paces with those focus blocks. But for now, all the work you're doing with the Run Durability program is setting the stage, maintaining that run fitness. Where in our case, you're adding the bike work through the out season. And we're going to take all of that and drive it into a run focus block where we'll really kind of change the paces and go forward. Okay. Before I head over to your questions, I want to put this out there. Definitely, please head over to Endurance Nation. We are the world's largest and fastest online triathlon team. Over 700 members train together online for their races each season. We are the Division 1 two-time global triathlon champions. I'm hoping to be third time as well. Things look pretty good so far. You're not going to find a better group of more supportive people in a community that's been built around the concepts of sharing information and keeping one another accountable, led by two of the most knowledgeable coaches. We put 1,000 people across every finish line since 2010, which means we have so much data, so much more data than the local coach in terms of how to race, how to improve, where to spend your time. Truly, it's an improvement, and it's ridiculously cheap as well. In fact, we'll even give you guys a free trial. This slide here, the 7-day trial, is just to put up there because this is going to go on the internet. But for those of you who've attended, I will be emailing you a special link to a 30-day webinar. So you get a month free. Come in, actually load a Run Durability program into your account, let you start training with our Run Durability program and get you guys on track. Okay? Awesome. So with that said, let me head over to the questions section here and see what we got going on. All right. Thank you very much for everything you got here. All right. Awesome. All right. So just diving in incrementally. David asks, is TRP race day pace then? Yes. So David, or let me read the whole question. Is TRP, total rate pace, is that your race day pace? That's the number we're supposed to focus on during the race, correct? So I want you to think very clearly. When we get to race day, David, inside Endurance Nation on the run, we want you to focus more on the heart rate than the pace. So I don't want you to be training at, say 8-minute miles or 8:17s, and then say on race day, I've got to run 8:17s. What I want is that run pace is going to build a familiarity, both internally, like consciously and unconsciously, with an effort level that is represented in a pace number and by a heart rate number. That heart rate number becomes far more important on race day in the run perspective because the heart rate number encapsulates everything your body's experiencing: heat, nutrition, pacing, etc. Whereas a pace number just shows you how fast you're traveling. So on race day, we tend to use that heart rate number. So yes, ideally that your pace would map from this TRP to what you would see on race day, but that's not what the actual tool that we would use to manage that. We would look at heart rate instead, particularly also looking at the heart rate you create on the bike and how we transition that heart rate from the bike to the run, which many of you know from our guidance. Okay. All right, Eric, nice to see you. Thanks for checking in here. As you build, this question from Doug, as you build weekly mileage from 26 to 28 to 30 miles per week in the out season, which weekly run do you want us to add the miles to? It seems to make sense to add to the long run on Wednesday or Sunday. Doug, it really depends on what fits into your schedule. And this goes to sort of that self-coached athlete perspective, whatever fits in your world. In general, my bias is that you wouldn't necessarily add more to the already long run on your program. So if you're running, if you've got 3:30s, 2:40s, and then 160 runs, so 3, 2, and 1 of the runs in increasing order. I'd rather say, I'd rather have, instead of 3:30s, I'd rather have 2:30s, and add add a mile to the 130, make that a 40, and then add one of those 40s another hour, make that a 60. So that long run isn't getting any longer, but I'm raising the distance on some of those other shorter runs. In an ideal world, we're kind of building an engine that you can sustain run wise across your whole week. And so the flatter we make those levels across your week, if you're thinking about run distances covered in a week, the flatter we make that whole schedule, with the exception of perhaps one run, the better. Because in season, we will shuffle the workouts like that. Okay, Doug, like when we get in season and we're talking race prep for an Ironman, I'm going to want you to put out an 18-mile run, and then your week will be very unbalanced. Just sort of inherently by design, it would be better if we could have more frequent runs. So I tell people, is it something you can get up and do in the morning? Like I'll hit the treadmill sometimes before the kids wake up. Can you get in a 3-mile run at lunch? Especially now in November, hell, it's like 28 degrees outside. I'm not going to break a sweat if I have to go run at midday and then sit back down at the office. But that's, I've afforded myself 3 more miles in a week. It's the kind of thing like, keep the shoes and the shorts in the car so you can kind of zip out and do that run anytime possible. All right. Nemo asks, how do you incorporate trail running? Because it's typically a slower pace at the same heart rate. In this case, Nemo, I wouldn't worry so much about the pace for the trail runs. And I think this goes to that fun element at the end, which I talked about in that fun slide. Normally when we're training for a race, we don't do a lot of trail running unless you live in, beautiful Utah or something. You're never going to have that experience. So in that case, I'm much more interested in you saying, okay, hey, I want to keep running fun. I want to keep it interesting, and I've got this total mileage quotient that I'm trying to hit, and I'm going to spend X percentage of my time running on a trail. I'll take that. So I'd rather, in your case, I might look more at time than I would mileage. So if that on a trail, instead of running a 9-minute mile, you're going to run an 11-minute mile, then I would just look at the total time gains for that than distance, because the trail runs won't necessarily be representative of the good work that you've done. But in your case, I prefer that variety. For folks, and this is something I should put out there, if you're constantly on the treadmill inside crushing yourself, that gets old super fast. It can really kind of set you back. All right. Rich is back. The 2-week retirement is over, he says. Run durability is a new focus. What are your thoughts about increasing the number of runs off the bike as the season progresses? I've been thinking about always having a break, even if only a 15-minute run. Yes, I'm a big fan of that, Rich. But I think from a macro level perspective, if in order of priority, in any given week, your long run itself is the most important standalone workout you have from a run perspective in the final 12 weeks. If you're going to add anything to that week, like I said earlier in the webinar, I'd rather modify that Sunday workout so we can have you go into a 90-minute ride and then a 60-minute run, say. So add that run off the bike, but a longer run, not just a quick run, but a longer run that's going to force you to get better about nutrition, better about pacing, etc. Really teaches you sort of where you need to be on that run on Sunday. And then we can kind of fill in the rest of the week with frequency and so on. The thing we have to balance, of course, is keeping you healthy and so on. So that's kind of what I look at. But I think for you, don't just look to overall frequency in season, which is good, but I'd also look at the value of that second run, kind of a medium long run, not just a long run that specifically follows a bike. Because when you run 15 minutes, anybody can, bust out 5K pace for 15 minutes. But what I'm really looking for is for you to spend time running at a race specific pace that itself gets hard. And for most of us, that pace doesn't get hard until you hit an hour. Because the paces are generally lower than what we normally have. Okay. Thanks, Rich. All right. Brad says, in using the Run Durability Program, are we giving up some speed at this point in the season for more frequency and distance? Yes, you are. There's still speed in the Endurance Nation out-season plan. There's still speed in the Sunday workout. And for me right now, personally, myself, I've got one workout a week where I try and push myself. This week, because it's Thanksgiving week, I got the turkey trot. I got to, warm up for that and go burn off some turkey. I'll try and run that 5K pretty fast. But otherwise, yes, the rest of the week is just about the frequency stuff. Because remember, every week we're going to move the needle on that run. So we're going to go from 30 miles a week to 33 miles a week to 36 miles a week to 39 miles a week, and maybe take a week to cut back, and then 40 miles a week. So we're constantly moving that needle up, and there's a cost with that continued progression, especially on the run, given historically, again, remember that pie chart, what a low percentage of your total workout pie it is. And so by putting more emphasis on it now and expanding that pie, we have to be very mindful of what we're doing. Overall, you're not, the thing I want you to focus on is that you're not necessarily giving up, while you're giving up speed work, it doesn't mean that you're giving up all hopes of speed. You can definitely gain speed and be fast just by virtue of running more frequently, getting leaner, getting more tuned into your paces and your heart rate, sort of better calibrated there. There's lots of opportunity for speed there. And more importantly, speed is represented by race day performance. And so speed on race day is not just a function of doing lots of speed work in your training. And you'll have that time at the focus period. Okay. Juan, great to have you here from Brazil. So at least 48 hours between runs has been key for me to avoid a stress fracture that he had. How to achieve frequency and respect that recovery period. So his suggestion is, day one, you run long in the morning and then short in the evening. Day two, bike only. Day three, repeat day one. Day four, repeat day two. Will that work? Juan, I'd have you think outside the box a little bit on that. Yes, I like the idea, especially in your race prep period, of stacking those two runs together, like an evening and a morning even. It doesn't have to be the same day, but putting those two runs together, or a long run followed by a shorter run the next day or the next morning, I'd be all about that. But I would also expand what you define as running to allow you to be strong. So, can you do some of that time on a treadmill? What about the elliptical? Some people will use pool running. There's plenty of sort of run-related exercises that don't have to be straight running. And I would be happy to entertain that conversation with people who are frequently injured from running. For many people, it's just, it could be body composition, which I know is not Juan's problem at all, but they're carrying extra weight, or the run itself becomes costly. And so finding alternative means to continue to move that dial and improve your fitness that will eventually translate into more actual running, I'll take that, but also in your case, Juan, I would say, what would it mean to run 10 minutes a day? Like if you ran 10 minutes today, 10 minutes tomorrow, and 10 minutes the next day, I'm assuming that's not the same cost as running, 75 minutes one day and then 45 minutes the next, which is more of the scenario you're talking about. So the point is, I think what I'd like people to focus on now is in the wintertime, we don't have that race or those longer runs on the schedule. Can we use these shorter runs to build you to the place where you can run 15 minutes back to back to back, or 20 minutes? There's going to be some point where you're going to have a pushback from your body, like, hey, maybe it's 30 minutes a day, maybe it's 25 minutes a day, where it says, hey, now I'm starting to feel it the next day. I don't like how I feel. I'm getting tight. I want to back off. But in general, the pace and effort is so low here in the wintertime that we shouldn't run into a lot of those early issues. So hopefully we can change some of that changes for you. Okay. All right. Got Al Truscott checking in. Man, it's a who's who of Endurance Nation. What's up, Al? So returning from total time off running, in his case, abdominal surgery. Welcome back. What should the return to running be like in terms of frequency and volume? Over how long a period of weeks? In general, what I'll tell people, Al, is that it takes about 6 weeks to get yourself back from wherever you started. So whatever day you say it's go time for you to get back, look ahead 6 weeks and mark that day on the calendar and count down across that day. Because that's important. Every day you're going to be one day closer, and there's progress in that just by virtue of, father time. But also it brings you closer to that goal and closer to the understanding, like, hey, that's when I'm going to feel normal again. So you almost have to take that normal side out of the equation. The second piece of it, obviously, with abdominal surgery is what type of surgery was it? Was it laparoscopic or not? There may be, some sort of deeper considerations with your abdomen and ability to run as well. So just, asterisk, put that on the side. I would, use this, essentially, I would use this lockdown as an opportunity for you to say, hey, I know I'm just getting back into running. And for me, covering a mile, whether it's running or run walking or walking or stair climbing, is going to be a challenge for me, and I'm going to build it up from there. So what I'd like to see people generally do is they return from a significant layoff, or in your case, from a surgery that precipitated a massive layoff, is I would start off with frequency, and I would give yourself 3 weeks to just kind of find your legs and get back into it. So I'd have relatively low expectations around running, and I wouldn't really be looking at my watch other than just logging the time. But I'd say, hey, in week 1, I want to run 4 times. In week 2, I want to run 5 times. Week 3, I want to run 6 times. And the total time doesn't have to change. You're just reshuffling what those workouts look like. After about 3 weeks, 21 days worth of, being back in the run game, you're going to have a much better sense of where your body's at. And then you can start to, sort of move forward. But like I mentioned to Juan, I would also take advantage of, alternate methods like the treadmill, stair climbing, elliptical as ways of being aerobic cardiovascularly in a running like motion without necessarily all the cost of running right out of the gate. Okay. Steve Ross, holy cow, who the heck is going to be here next? Like Mark Allen, this is crazy. Steve, what's up? Does there come a time where run frequency moves you into a junk mile of perspective versus quality? Man, for the strong silent type, what a good question. That is awesome, Steve, and I really appreciate that question. It's been something that's been sort of in the back of my mind, and I hadn't really been able to bring it out, so I appreciate the question. Got to put me on the spot here and make me talk about it. I think that when we talk about junk mileage for me comes at a point in time where, in the case of a season where we're talking about run durability in the run, expanding the run pie in the winter, the junk mileage comes for me when you're running at a time when you should be doing something else to improve your overall fitness. So as we move in season and race prep comes and we start to have to up the bike miles and the swimming needs to go up to be prepared for race day, if you're still insisting on running extra workouts when really you should be putting in 8 hours on the bike this week, but you're sacrificing some of that bike because of this run, or you're not letting go of the run because of the bike, I think that's where we start entering that mode of like junk miles. Because for me, the point of this run durability block is to build the consistency, frequency, the fitness, the running health that you can use in season to get ready for your race. So it's a tool. It's not an end unto itself. A successful run on race day isn't just a function of doing lots of running all year long. You're a triathlete, you've got to swim and bike as well. So I'd say as we make that transition to your in-season training, that's where we start to have to say, hey, what's the true value of this run? And again, keep in mind that for long course triathletes, the paces of which we're talking about is actually very relevant to their race day running. If this is a running program, like for runners, and you're trying to run a marathon, you might run a marathon at 7:20s, but I'm talking about an 8:30 pace. That's not very consistent with the pace you'd be running on in a marathon. And I probably would want to rethink how I'd handle the run durability conversation for just runners only versus long course triathletes like we're talking about here. But again, I would look at that sort of in-season line. So for me, success would be, hey, from November 1st, which is when I got back into my training, through say March 1st. So I've got 4 months. In those 4 months, how did I do for frequency? How did I do for run volume and consistency? What did that look like? Now that I'm at March 1st and I'm targeting Texas, I've got March, April, and part of May. I've got 10 weeks to get to there. My focus then switches to making those run workouts and those weeks essentially be as effective as possible. And I definitely am more willing to flex on the run and the run frequency at that point in time because I've made that investment early. What we find more often than not with age group triathletes is that the winter time is kind of catch as catch can. They may run a half marathon or a marathon, but not really train for it, kind of use last year's fitness, take a bunch of time off, put on some weight, try and get motivated in the winter, but fail once or twice. And then spring comes in like March and they're like, let's get into it. And all of a sudden the run mileage was shooting up where they've not. And you contrast that with the Endurance Nation athlete or the run durability athlete who, is thinking November to March 1st versus the average age grouper who wakes up March 1st. And if I can say I'm running 30 miles a week for the 16 weeks right there, I'm putting in almost 500 miles that other athlete is not going to have. And I'm doing it in a safe, sustainable way. That means I can build off of it and I'll be in a much better place than those other athletes. Okay. All right. So David's asking about some questions. David, thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it. Dave wants to schedule a call. Of course, as a member of Endurance Nation, you guys are able to reach out and connect with us, not only through the forums in the chat box, the blue button at the bottom of the site, but you can schedule calls with myself and Rich to talk about your training. Be more than happy to do that. This is the seasonal transition period of time, and not only am I wrapping up Florida, Arizona, and soon Cozumel as well, but I'm also spending a lot of time helping people sort of reprioritize their goals overall and drive into the next year. And for many of us, run durability becomes a great safe place. Running is easy. Running is not weather dependent. It fits the seasons. It's a nice change from the swim, bike, run type of mentality that we've had. And you get to feel like you're still moving the needle forward without having to do lots of volume. And quite frankly, the biggest challenge that we have coaching age group athletes is helping them divorce an understanding of volume as the sole validation for work achieved in a training cycle. I go back and look at some of my early training notes and coaching notes. It's amazing how much the conversation was simply about volume or time spent. And now, with knowledge and experience, we're able to have conversations. We talk about frequency and sort of total system health. It's a very exciting place to be, and working with the team and being able to use last year's run durability information as a standalone program to incorporate that into this year's out season, and then be able to carry that through the rest of our training plans and synchronize the training we're doing now with the out season with our race preparation training is beyond exciting. The more I can do as your coach, as your leader, to help you set positive expectations and understanding of the work you need to do now and how it relates to race day, the better off we're going to be. And this program is certainly part of that. Okay. This has been awesome, folks. I have definitely gone over. We're at an hour and 17 minutes now, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank you very, very much for attending today's webinar on run durability. Again, like I said, we'll be following up. You will get links to not only the slides, but the recordings as well. You'll get a link to, those of you not on the team will get a link to create a 30-day trial. You can load up a run durability plan. You'll get a phone call from me, a roadmap from Coach Rich, kind of walk you through your season, let you know how run durability will work, and I'll be happy to do that with you. Everyone else, if you do have questions, those of you on the team, obviously you can find me in the forums or use the blue button at the bottom of the chat. Those of you not on the team and you want to connect, please do not respond to the email that I send you, because I just don't do email. Too many people on the team. But you can find us on social media. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. For Facebook, Endurance Nation. We're on Twitter at Team EN. And you can certainly message us there. That'll get to me. I'll be happy to answer you. We also have a couple of blog posts over at endurancenation.us/blog on run durability. And you can certainly post your comments and feedback there as well. So I hope everyone has a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. Remember, running is easy. Get out and find a turkey trot. Kick off your run durability program. Keep it smart. Take a look back. Take a few minutes. Find your previous run data. Make sure that your run durability goals are in alignment with what you've done in the past and represent a smart and intentional progress across this time through the new year. And I look forward to seeing what you guys can do in 2016 and beyond. All right. Thanks again so much for your time. This is Coach Patrick from Endurance Nation signing off. We'll see you guys online or at the races.